All right. Welcome to the Quest for Excellence podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Montreal. I am beyond excited and really honored to have today's guest on the show. She, without question, has cracked the code on what it takes to not only be a loving, supportive, and empathetic parent, but also how to actually get your kids to like spending time with you and respect what you have to say at the same time, which is a big time problem among parents. So she's also the wife of my mentor and someone who's had just an incredible impact on my life, Jaqueline Lerner. With her unwavering support for Jeff's mission to change the education landscape across the globe, I've been able to live the life most people dream of while changing the lives of thousands and thousands of people in the process. So without any further rambling, I want to welcome Jaqueline Lerner to the show. Jaqueline, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thanks, Jeff. I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, really, it's amazing. And I know I just told you this when we talked before we hopped on here, but really didn't have to do this, even if, Jeff maybe have recognized me through my interactions in the group and Entra. But just, you could have said no, even with that kind of approval. So thank you for being here. And the reason I wanted to have you here is not to, and I meant to tell you this earlier, actually, I forgot. But this is not going to be me vicariously interviewing Jeff through you. This is not what it's about, just so you know. And the reason I wanted to have you here, a few weeks ago, I guess this might have been maybe a month or so when you guys actually recorded it, but about a week and a half ago, Jeff released an interview you guys had, more of a conversation than an interview. And the whole topic and the majority of the discussion was how you guys have managed to be such effective parents with having such a busy workload and crazy stuff going on and travel and all that, and videos, and it's a wild lifestyle, but you seem to have really balanced, loving kids that love you guys and want to spend time with you, which it's sad to say that is not the norm, right? So that's
I definitely, don't think that that's the norm a lot of the time. So I appreciate you noticing.
Yeah. And transparency, I was actually one of those kids who really wish I was in more of that environment. We'll maybe talk a little bit about that. So that really struck me. And so this is really for people kind of like me who grew up and didn't really have that, or parents who are really struggling to connect with their kids, who you might even have a hard time striking up a conversation. And if you're in that boat, this is going to be able to help you. And what this really became for me, I told you this too, kind of like a case study. There was just so much information in the 52 minutes or whatever when you guys talked. And it was such a fluid, natural, smooth conversation. You could tell you guys are super in love and it's real genuine. So that was awesome too. But I really want to take a deeper dive. Yeah, absolutely. I want to take a deeper dive and dissect some of the stuff you guys talked about. So before we get into any of that stuff, me selfishly, and I think the audience would like to maybe get to know you a little bit. And I didn't do, like Jeff likes to say, I stalked you a little bit on your social media, not too much. And about all I know right now is you're from Utah, born in Utah, don't know much about your upbringing. So if you want to talk about your childhood a little bit and kind of how you became who you are, that'd be great.
Okay, so I grew up in a very small town right in central Utah. It was called, it's named Ephraim. And there's only about 5,000 people that lived in the town. And I grew up, I was the oldest of three siblings, had a younger sister, younger brother. And my dad was actually, for the majority of the time I was growing up, he was a coal miner. And he drove an hour and a half to work, an hour and a half back from work, worked really, 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 really hard. And my mom worked actually for the school district, but in all of her free time, she did service for the Hispanic people that lived in our community. And it was just always like lots and lots of service. She was bilingual and she was always helping out. And also, I think a big part of my childhood that I should mention, and I mentioned in the interview you spoke about with Jeff and I, is my house growing up was kind of the place for the kids to be. And my parents always, made everybody feel very welcome. And not only did they make them feel welcome, but they had friendships with our friends also. So, and then once, I graduated, I moved up to Salt Lake for a while and then ended up down in Vegas. And then ended up back down here in St. George to put a really long story short, as a single mom of 3 kids. I moved here because my mom had moved down here, and shortly after I moved here, I met Jeff, and we were together, got married, and had one more child. So I'm now the mother of 4 children, 2 teenagers, and then an 11-year-old and a 4-year-old.
How old are the boys? What are their ages?
The boys are 17 and 16. Actually, my oldest, Braxton, is about to turn 18 in just a couple of weeks. So that's pretty crazy.
I see. Yeah, that's wild. That's a big deal. So cool. I didn't know that. I thought it was 2 and 2 with the kids. I didn't know you came with 3. I did not know that.
Yeah.
I got it. I told you I didn't do too much stalking, and that's interesting. And to go back a little bit, your parents. And this is one thing that struck me from what you said when I was listening. And I'm curious your thoughts on this. It sounded like you came from a place that you ended up creating, right? But you both admitted, and we're kind of skipping ahead, but this is perfect. You both admitted during the talk, it wasn't like you knew all this stuff inherently. You both went to therapy and learned this, and it was a craft that took time to develop, and you didn't just wake up one day and become this incredible parent. So it's interesting. Is it because you even had that in the beginning that you were even able to do it, were even able to learn it? Or I know you mentioned a comment in the talk too, that you could have been their friends regardless. So what was the special sauce to really kind of even get you to realize you needed therapy or help with it? Did something happen, or were there some difficulties?
Yeah, well, I mean, to be totally honest, when Jeff moved here, we were blending a family. I mean, Jeff was an only child with no kids. And then it came into this situation with a single mom and her 3 kids. And I mean, no matter how healthy the people, like, that's going to need some work,
Yeah. I never thought about it that way. I've thought about the Jeff single child, kind of having a bit of an eclectic upbringing, a little bit, not really normal, in high school and the jazz pianist and all that. And coming into that kind of situation, makes sense where it might have been a bit of a learning curve to fully join the team with that. I understand.
The boys and I, the boys they weren't older. They were like, 8 and 10 or 9 and 10. But I mean, it was, they were kind of used to being, the men of the house. And I mean, there was adjustments that we all had to make to be able to make this work successfully. And so Jeff and I, we're both really very much into learning as much as possible, and especially when it comes to therapy. Like, we love to go do some good therapy and learn things and then implement them and see what the changes can be. And so we were both really, willing to do that. And so it just worked out perfect that we could put so much of our time into that, and at the same time have it be something that benefited our family so much.
And not everybody has the ability to put their pride or ego or whatever aside and do that. So kudos to you both, especially coming into that kind of situation, the instant family mix right away. That takes a lot of courage from everybody, the kids and you guys. So that's awesome. And I would have to think the one thing that if you would put it on one word or one phrase or one thing, and Jeff coined it as active empathy. Would you say that kind of idea is the really the catalyst for all this and how you're able to keep it afloat? Because to me, that's what I got from the whole thing. And if you want to talk on that for a sec.
Yes, I absolutely think that is the key with, and this isn't just for parenting. This is for, successful friendships and marriages. But, I've especially found with parenting that if you're constantly putting yourself in the position of how must they be feeling, and how can I help them feel better? How can I let them know that I understand how they feel? That's a huge thing too. And I mean, all of that really does come back to empathy, because if you're feeling for somebody else, then it makes it a lot easier to have communication with them, have any influence on them, and be able to talk to them. So empathy, I think, is definitely key.
So important. And I'm not going to talk about anything me too much at all, but I got to mention this. Through Entre, we had to create our own mission statements, and one of mine, the point of it is, I'm not going to say the whole thing, but everything you do is with a motive of empathy, decency, and collaboration. And that had really nothing to do with this talk. It was just kind of my life. And the first step is understanding how they're feeling, right? And then if you know that, you can abuse that, which everybody knows what kind of situations those are in relationships and kids getting abused, or be decent, empathy, decency, use that in the right way to help the person. Then how can you both grow? That's exactly what you guys are doing. But it all starts with empathy. You have to understand, because if you don't, and you try to, similar how you talked about, if you try to lecture someone, or if you're stern when they're in a shaky or agitated state, it's not going to work, right? You have to talk to them in the right way at the right time with the right tone, and have to have tact. So I want to keep going too, because there's so many things I want to mention. I normally don't have anything in front of me, but I have some bullet points that I wanted to touch on because they were so powerful to me. And one of the things you said in the very beginning, and this seems alien to some adults, not even just some parents with their kids' friends, but you mentioned very early on when you guys started talking, and it was kind of a slip, but not really. You mentioned our friends when you were talking about your kids' friends. I love that. It just made me smile every time I heard it. I've listened to it a couple of times, but that was great. And even you were like, oh, did I? But you embraced it right after and said, no, they're our best friends. And I love that so much. And it's so friggin' rare. And let me tell you a quick story. All right, Jackie, you're going to love this. Okay. Your family life and the way you carry yourselves and kind of the cool, party environment, but very under control. I haven't thought about that or felt that since the story I'm about to tell you. Again, super long story short. I went to LSU. I'm from New Orleans. I went down there for a few semesters. My sister's fiance at the time lived there his whole life, knew a bunch of people, some high influential people, whatever. Went to this really nice house in a very old part of New Orleans, Old Willow, beautiful, beautiful area. And it was basically this mansion. And I'll never forget this. This is the end of the story. And I walk in and I faintly hear this like super loud Star Wars music in the background, like this crazy battle scene. Like, what's going on here? We walk in this beautiful house. There's cool stuff everywhere. It's just really modern. And I walk in the living room, and there's this music blasting. There's 3 kids fighting with lightsabers, jumping around the furniture, like going crazy. And the parents are in the kitchen, kind of hippie-ish, very open, and people are coming and going. It was such a relaxed environment. They had this huge backyard with these like massive tree houses with suspension bridges. Kids were running. It was like such an incredible environment. And I akin it to how you guys said it. Now, I'm not saying it's like that, but I haven't thought about that time in my life until I heard you guys talk, and I'm getting to know kind of how you run your house and things go. It's very open. People hang out wherever you want. There's no, most of the time kids go, slam their door and go in their room. That is not the case with you guys. And if you can talk about in the beginning, this might be what's tough for some people. How did you create that? I guess either from the beginning of therapy or as the boys became teenagers. How did you cultivate that in the beginning, I guess?
Well, so yeah, it's first of all, to your story, I get that it basically is how our house is. And, The funny thing about it is the kids hang out with Jeff and I in our room at night, even when our boys aren't here, because we've gotten to be such good friends with them, and they tell us about their day, and talk to us about what's going on in their life. And I mean, I absolutely wouldn't have it any other way. And it is funny when you start asking me questions about it to think about how it's evolved. But I guess there are a few times that stand out in my mind where I realize, I did things a lot different than a lot of parents would have at that time, that, kind of pave the road for them to be, who they want to be around us. And I don't know, there's one example, like a couple of years ago, one of our sons decided, he and his friends decided that they wanted to start rapping, and they wanted to make music. And at first they were doing it on their own up in the game room, and kind of it was just their own thing. And then one of them kind of mentioned it to us, and they were like, well, are you sure you guys want to hear it? I mean, it's not like, you might disapprove, whatever. And Jeff and I were like, no, you guys are like, that's art. You're making music. Like, let us hear it. That's awesome, you know?
Nice. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I could
yeah.
kind of tell, I mean, there's four of them, and I could kind of tell they were, you know, looking at us, because I mean, they were rapping, they were singing about things that I guess some parents would say, oh, that's not appropriate or whatever. But
Right, right.
you know, Jeff and I listened and we're like, oh my gosh, you guys, this is so cool. Like, it's so cool that you're taking the time to do this. The lyrics are, you know, awesome. Like, and I think that's one time that stands out in my mind as a time that we could have been a lot. I think a lot of parents would have been like, well, this would be good if you didn't say that, or you didn't do this, or you tweaked
Mm-hmm,
that.
mm-hmm.
And it's like we've just, it's one situation, but it's kind of a big situation, you know what I mean? It's like they
Yeah,
were
yeah.
doing what they wanted to do at the time. They were expressing themselves, and that's always been my big thing, is like, let them express themselves. I mean, that phase is long but past now. But you know, I mean, just to see how their comfort level changed with us, that we accepted what they were doing, was like, man, I'm going to keep
Incredible.
doing things like this. Why would I not want this? And now I know they're making music. They're going to talk to us about it. Like, we're going to hear their stuff. Just little stuff like that, you know?
That's incredible. And it's funny what you just said at the end there. That was just writing a note on what you said so I didn't forget. But what's my takeaway from that is the fact that they weren't nervous at all and were more of like, you guys really want to hear this? A lot of kids would be like, oh God, I'm not going to do this for my parents. And they'd be so scared or nervous for whatever reason. But the reason that happened, the reason they were able to do that, is because of what you just said. There were small, subtle things you did weeks, months prior to that built the relationship closer,
Yeah.
right? Little smaller situations like this that built up to this point, and then boom, it's kind of you had a new plateau, and
Yeah.
then
And
it's
you
going to be
know,
the next thing. And so,
I've spent so many hours of this time growing this just in my car. And as silly as that sounds, it's true, because of all the rides you're giving to your kids before they get licenses and stuff. And I've always
yeah, yeah,
made, I decided a long time ago, okay, when they get in my car, my kids and their friends, just my kids, whoever, they're going to listen to the music they want to listen to. And I'm not going to say one thing about it. I'm going to listen to what they're talking about, and I'm not going to criticize or judge or tell them, oh, well, you should have done this or that or whatever else. Like, I'm going to just let it all flow as if I wasn't there. So that, you know, this is the key thing with all of this, is if you make them so comfortable in talking to you about all these other things, then you're going to be there and you're going to hear the things that are the red flags, where you can
right.
figure out how to approach them about that. I don't want to be in the dark, you know? I want to know as much about them as possible.
The flip side of that, if you take the kind of traditional, maybe stern road, what that actually does more times than not, it gets them to do the thing you're telling them not to do. You're pushing them away towards that. That's what happened to me. I rebelled big time. And I want to make one thing clear, all right? So I know this, and some of the audience might not, but it's not like you're letting your kids run around smoking doobies, drinking 40s, and doing whatever they want, be crazy. That's not the point, not at all. You are allowing them to be themselves, and this gives them a chance to make the mistakes to learn who they are, as opposed to being, and I love the point, I want to bring this up to you guys talked about, if you're always the one to praise or reprimand them at every single moment of your life, you become the caretaker of their feelings. You decide how they're going to feel. And that's so jacked up.
Yeah.
That
And it just
not
causes
good.
your kids to become hostile towards you too. I mean,
Right, yeah,
it
yeah.
does much more harm than good for them to always feel like they have to be pretending, being different than who they are every time they're around you, you know?
Right. I guess this is a perfect time to slip in. I know a quote of both of you guys is that it made a huge impact, and it's starting to me every day because I'm really kind of leaning on it. But the John Gottman, if you want to influence someone, let them have influence over you. That is really one of the most profound when it comes to communication, relationships, interaction, and on any level with anyone. This isn't just about parents or spouses or whatever. Any kind of relationship, you have to kind of let go of that control a bit and realize that if you influence someone instead, you're going to get that control in the right kind of way. It's going to be a natural way. So if you want to talk about that, and I guess how that came out in the therapy and that experience, and also if you want to, because one thing I'm fascinated by, it sounded like there were so many parents when you guys were like, oh my God, give me more, were fighting against this. And I'm curious to hear how your take on why they were like that.
Okay. So on the allowing others to have influence over you, I think it's pretty simple if you think about it with yourself. Because if you think of yourself in a relationship where, you know, somebody is acting like they are, you know, above you and they have the power over you and they're there to tell you what to do, but there's never any, you know, they're never asking back any advice from you, or they're never taking what you have to say into consideration. I mean, how likely are you going to be to do the things that they're telling you? Because there's not mutual respect when it's like that, right? And we listen to the people that we respect, and I'm not going to listen to somebody that doesn't give me the feeling that they have, you know, any desire to hear my opinion, or that I have no influence over them. And so why would a child do that? Like, you know,
even if what you're saying is valid or correct, that you still have to have respect for it to land, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And so I mean, I think it really is important. And I mean, the thing I always worry about is I don't want it to be like I'm saying I do these things with the kids just because, like, that's how I'm going to get them to be comfortable with me or talk to me. I genuinely want to do these things because I do respect them so much as people. Like, I think that a lot of adults forget, like, we were all there. We all went through these years. Like, it was hard as hell. I don't think any of us came out of it and were like, oh, the teenage years were a breeze. Like, everybody was so great to me. You know what I mean? And these kids.
Oh, it didn't happen when you were 18. It just immediately shifted and you were a mature adult. Oh, like, come on. Right.
And, you know, I mean, these kids they have so much value to add to basically any situation. I just don't think they're really given the opportunity to a lot of the times. And you know, the other thing is they know what's right and wrong. Like, when I was talking about how in the car, I let them have the conversation they want to have. It's not like they haven't gone the past however many years of their life hearing what's good, what's bad, what's right, what's wrong from the entire, you know, society, teachers, parents, like everybody. We don't have to jump in and micromanage every little thing that they're saying or thinking or feeling. Like, they already know.
Right. You said something in the talk, every moment doesn't have to be a teaching moment.
Yes.
That hit me so hard. That's so true. And it might even come from a place of love or whatever. And you said something else about, you know, control is more about safety. But if you keep someone safe forever in a bubble like that, they're never going to really live. You got to let them do their own thing. That's why I respect this so much.
Yeah.
But I love that thing.
I think if you can get excited about, I'm excited to see who my kids are going to be. I'm excited to see, I said this in the podcast with Jeff, I'm excited to see the differences between us and them, you know, and like everybody adds something so different to the family, and it makes it such a cool experience if everybody is able to be, you know, their true selves.
Yeah, right. What Jeff made that comment about, if you know, those 8 kids in a group together, they're all going to be unique, but they might, you know, walk into a store and the owner's going to think, oh, they're all going to be stealing something. They're putting this group kind of blanket mentality, when that's so wrong. And you're right, Pete, there's all this uniqueness that we're missing out of from the 13 to 17, where we think, oh, they just think they know everything. Then if that's the case and we know that they don't, why don't we help them? Why don't we engage them genuinely?
Yeah.
Or we put all these cliches on the teen years. Silly.
Yeah. And people, so I hear so many people say, I mean, up until this is the thing when you ask, like, you know, what made me want to be really different with it, is I had heard my whole childhood and life from so many adults, you know, oh, teenagers, they're just so hard. Oh, if you can just get through the teen years and everything like that. And then
right.
When my kids started getting into those years, I was like, well, wait a minute. This seems like it's a great time to start being like friends with more, like, you know, even deeper friends with them, and like doing things with them. And like, kind of, experiencing those years with them more than like, oh, okay, well, let's just let them get through it and hope that we survive it. I don't want it to be like that. I want to be there with them
Right.
experiencing it.
What are you waiting for 18 or for what?
Yeah, until they,
some imaginary thing to happen?
It's kind of like, it seems like a lot of times it kind of gets, I don't know, pushed aside a little bit. And I get it. Like it is scary. It's scary when your kids start, becoming their own people and making their own decisions. But it's also like, it's so cool to sit back and relax about it and be like, all right, well, we've modeled for them, like what being a effective, person, friend, whatever, all these years, like they're going to turn out okay.
Right. If you've done your job, and like you said, society gives them, for the most part, and the quote unquote normal situation, you know what's right or wrong. You do not need being micromanaged every day of your life. It does not help you develop at all.
And I think a really important part of it that we touched on at the end that I think is a much bigger deal than what we even gave credit for is like, the world is being hard enough on them. Let them come home to a very safe and accepting place where they feel like they belong, because everybody needs, it's a human need to feel like you belong. And what better place to feel like you belong than your own home?
You just read my mind. I was going to bring up that exact thing next, the whole safe environment at home. That's so important. And, when I thought of this earlier, I know you're not going to take this the wrong way, because even the story I told you earlier, the house and Star Wars music and the kids and all that, they were very wealthy people. I think he was in real estate and the wife is a lawyer or something. And you guys are obviously doing okay, doing well. And someone might say, well, it's easy for you guys to say when you're not needing or things. We're not talking about giving things or money. If regardless of the situation, and if someone can come home from the harsh realities of the world and not feel like they're judged every second and can really put their guard down, because the super sad thing is, I don't even want to know the majority of people that come home and don't have that. It's from just being ignored to the extreme version of that, and you guys are the complete opposite side of the spectrum. Man, you're already seeing your kids develop in real time to become good adults. You're watching it happen. When most people turn their head, hope they get through their teen years, like you said, and pop out after high school as something okay, and it's sad. It really is. And you have such an active way of being about it. I got a quick question too. Jeff mentioned how he kind of came late to the party. He asked about, is there a cover charge to get in here and all that? Was that just, he eventually saw how awesome the relationship was with you guys? Because I got to say, the way you guys, you interact with your sons, you can tell they just love the crap out of you. It's awesome. It's really cool to see. It's really genuine. They really have a lot of love for you. So being that Jeff came in and they used to be the men of the house, and it's been a while since, it's been what, 9 years?
Yeah.
Is that something he just came around to lately, or, past few months, or through the Rona, or has that been,
I think
working at this for years?
I think a lot of it is, he's working so much and he's not here for it. But yeah, I think it's really amped up the past couple years. And he's like, he would kind of come home from work and see the kids. And Jeff's always been so great with, our kids and their friends, and he's down for whatever. I mean, I tell him all the time, like, he always says, I make it possible. And it's like, well, it's also him, because I'm like, well, let's go do this with the kids. And he's like, okay, when? Like, let me check my schedule. Well, let's go to Vegas for a couple days and take the kids and all their friends. Okay, yeah. Or, I mean, last night, he gets home from work after being up since 3 a.m. and he comes home and the boys and their friends are out playing basketball. And he texts me and he's like, I'm going to ball up with the boys for a little while. And, it's
that's
just
awesome.
He's, I think he was late to the party just because he's so busy. But I also think that he kind of had the same, I started pointing things out to him and said, I've been hearing this from these kids about how their life is at home. And I hope they feel comfortable here. And he's kind of, it evolved for him through all of that to kind of realizing, man, there kind of is a problem with how a lot of adults are with teenagers. And then, we got to talking about it more and more. And so I think that's what he was kind of what he's referring to when he says he was late to the party.
Yeah, I figured as much. I didn't think it was kind of an unwillingness, and it's interesting. And one thing I got to say, I respect about Jeff big time, because it's something that I will tell you directly that my mom had a hard time doing big time. Apologizing or admitting mistakes, and we openly talk about it. I love my mom to death, but the fact that he was able to realize that with not only someone, an outsider, someone who's younger, your own child, but being able to admit your mistakes to someone young like that, to start that conversation, that's so important. If you're not coming with where you actually feel in some way that you were at fault, at least in some way, if you don't come with that and they can't sense that, you're not going to win them over. So he must have done that, and it takes a lot.
It's weird how just because we're adults, we assume that we're right about everything we talk to our kids about. when
Yeah, or if they're younger than us, they know less by some inherent, what does that make? That makes no sense
at all. So, yeah. Oh, and to touch on
that's
your point
great.
about, you asked me a question a while ago that we never talked about, which was parents' pushback about kind of some of our ideas and stuff. And it's funny, we have a lot more parents that ask us for advice and take our advice and say how amazing it is what we have going at our house and with these kids and everything, than we do pushback. But also we definitely have encountered some parents that are like, it's too much, like the being friends with them and hanging out with them so much and letting things go. I think that's the biggest thing. I mean, there's so many things these kids say that I could jump in and have an opinion about, and I think that might be the hardest thing for a lot of parents, is just bite your tongue.
Hold your tongue. Yeah. And it doesn't mean you're not being a good parent.
Yeah, it actually means you're being a really
tell
good
them
parent
what to do.
If you just let them speak their mind.
Yeah, right. It's so important. It really is. And it gives them a chance to figure out who they are when they're young. When you have to do that when you're a lot older, it can be way tougher when you have to pretend to be an adult and you have no idea what's going on in life, because your support system or your crutch is gone. You're not living in their basement anymore. You don't have your own room in their house. You got to keep that thing.
Kids, I mean, my hope is that after my kids are grown and gone, they're wanting to come home for the holidays, or they're wanting to be back. I don't want them to, oh great, we finally escaped, and avoid us.
Right.
So I mean, it's all of that. It's not just while they're teenagers. I mean, I look at the big picture and it's like, I want this until I die. I want the closeness, once they start getting wives and kids, it's a big picture, and I want as much of it as I can get, the closeness with them.
I want to mention one more kind of a practical thing, and then we're getting close to kind of our stop here, but I have a few more questions for you. But one thing you guys discuss a lot is so important. I know people in my life that are, I'll just say, older than me, I'll leave it at that, or quite a bit older, they just detest technology and almost refuse. Even if they dabble a little bit, they refuse to get into it. But you can remove so much worry from your life by embracing technology, so you can know what the hell your kids are doing. Like that, you discussed it a lot. If you want to talk about that a little bit, even Jess says one of the best parts this day is watching the Snapchat feed from the whole kids in the group and you guys, and I can only imagine stuff that goes on in there. But if you want to talk about that, how important that is, you got to embrace technology. You can't, just have an email address that you don't use.
I have a
you got to have more than that.
Opinion about this, and I could go off about it for a while, but I mean, I'll keep it short. Here's the fact of the matter. You can not give your kids a smartphone. You can, try to monitor what they search up on the computers you have in your house. You can do all of that, but I can assure you that they will go somewhere else and they will search up the same things. And, my 16-year-old told me a couple months ago that they now have like people at school that have like old iPhones where you can actually rent a phone by the day or the week or the month. And so they can,
Wow.
and all you
Wow.
have to do, I mean, if you have a Snapchat account set up, you don't need your own phone. You just go get on another phone and you log into it. I've had kids over here before that have had Snapchat taken
Right.
away from them or their phones taken away from them. And they just get on somebody else's phone and log into their Snapchat. So it's like, I've always had the attitude, I'm just going to be a part of it. Like whatever they're into, I'm going to do my best at being into to try to, know as much as I can about it. Like knowledge is power as much with parenting as anything
Yeah.
else, right?
Well, and like you just said, knowledge is power, and you're not doing this for this reason, but it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
You're gonna know everything they're doing. Like you said, where they're at, where they're gonna be, like literally specifically the location that they're at whatever given time, and they're gonna be willing to tell you, as opposed to I'll be back, at
and
10
the other thing
or
we
whatever.
were saying that I think is so true, and whether you believe it's right or wrong, the way that most of these, teenagers know how to communicate these days is by text message, and so it's like, I'll communicate with them that way.
Yeah.
Like I have one kid in particular where I can get way more out of a conversation with them over a Snapchat conversation than I can face to face. So I'm going to take it. I'm not going to fight it and say, oh, you need to learn how to talk to me face to face. Like I'm going to roll with it.
And that goes right back to what I mentioned at the top of the show here. You got to have that empathy. That's the best thing for them, right? You're taking how they're feeling at that time, and that probably will lead into the future, them opening up a little bit when they see you next time, and a little more, and then you guys are super homies in a month. It's kind of how that goes. And it takes those little changes. I love you guys talk about, if you're having to do the big talk where all that frustration culminates into this overpowering talk, you think you're going to have this lecture to your kid, it's not going to work. They're going to do it anyway or not listen to you. You have to talk at neutral times when you guys are both calm, feeling good about each other, and it's mutual respect. You guys have got that down to a science.
If
I love
they're
it.
emotional,
it's fantastic.
Or you're emotional, nothing will be absorbed by either party. It's just wasted breath.
Doesn't matter. To be totally straight with you, Jacqueline, a little bit about my personal life. Me and my fiance, she's quite a bit younger than me, and which came with a lot of less maturity. And it took me quite a few years to figure out, just trying to, verbally or mentally, and not being abusive, just like trying to get the message across. Like, come on, it doesn't work. You have to just be an example, right? Be more of a mentor. It's never going to work by jamming it down somebody's throat. They have to want to do it, even when they're kids. Like we've been talking about, just because they're 14 doesn't mean they're some blob of non-existence. They have a conscience. They know what's going on. They're able to, assimilate into their environment and adapt. They're not these just vapid little beings. People think they are, but they're not. So if that can be one of the takeaways from this whole conversation, I think about my childhood. If people would have treated me, I'm not just talking about you guys as parents, but if more adults in the world would have looked at teenagers more like people. And I'll give you an example. For me, my niece and nephew, who I kind of helped raise, I remember when they were like little kids, and the moment that they could understand me, I talked to them like little people, not like, underlings or below me. And we still had those same vibes, 18 years later, 16 years later. You have to be that way. You're never going to grow a healthy relationship.
Exactly.
That's parent. So I don't want to, we're at about a 40-minute mark here, and I told you no more than 45 minutes or so, and I think this has been incredible so far. It's been a ton of great information. I've super appreciated your time, and I think there's maybe a couple more things that you said that really hit me. This last one I love. It might seem odd, but when you really think about it, do you want to be right all the time, or do you want to be close? I'd never heard somebody say it quite like that, but it makes so much sense. And you've alluded to it a lot of times. When you're interacting with someone and you don't agree with what they're saying, you don't always have to squash that, put that out. You don't have to do that. Like, do you want to prove a point, or do you want to grow closer so you can influence them easier, and then you'll get that kind of control you were looking for, right? I think that's so important. If you want to talk about that for a second, one of my favorite things you said.
Yeah, that's actually a little tidbit that I did get from our therapist, and it actually came at me with about marriage advice. And, I just thought, well, okay, that's true with every relationship though. Like, if you're
Yeah, yeah.
constantly feeling like you need to prove your point and you need to be right, like you're driving a wedge between the closeness that you could have with somebody. And so, even when there's times where basically I do know I'm right, I don't need it. Because the thing is, I need the closeness more than I need the rightness. You know what I want the
Right.
closeness.
Yeah, you're not being selfish.
And what point are you proving anyway by having to constantly drive that, I'm right. Like, I'll prove it to you. And even like when Jeff and I have had disagreements before, he'll say to me, like, do you want to be right or do you want to be close? And there's really nothing you can come back at with that. Because we all really do like want to be close, right? So yeah, I think it's really important.
That's great.
Important to keep
that says a lot
in your
about
mind
you
when you're parenting.
It is,
for sure.
Because it really says a lot about your ego. And if you find yourself doing that a lot, you might need to turn that mirror around. And that's real. Look, let's get all BS aside. This all boils down to, if you're a parent having a hard time parenting your child, you might need to look at yourself and do some parenting. Do some self-discovery on yourself. Why are you always getting frustrated? Why do you always react in these ways? Why do you always need to have these big talks that don't do anything? You might want to try and do.
Go ahead. Ask yourself why the outcome is always the same. If your kid is always going in the room, slamming the door, or not wanting to talk to you, I mean, it's partly their stuff, but also like look at yourself. How could you make yourself more approachable? How could you make them more comfortable with you? Like, what can you do? Because the only person you have control over is actually yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. To steal one thing Jeff said that I loved, and somebody could take this and use it. It's a great line. You could literally go plop down next to your teenage son and be like, "Look, brah, our relationship sucks. Let's try to work on this. Just be blunt about it. Be direct. Don't try to make like it's somebody's fault, or if you want to be close, just forget about being right. Forget about being. That might take you putting your head in the sand, just taking a little beating for a minute, but you'll be closer.
And
afterwards.
If you really want to take it up,
and again, if you
go to your teenager and say, our relationship sucks, what can I do to fix it?
Yes. Yeah. What is my part in that? And then let's work on it together. If you can start first, and that's the hardest thing, again, putting that pride aside. Just as a parent, you brought them into the world. You got to do that. You really don't have much of a choice. This isn't a contest of who's right with your children. You're trying to safeguard their future and make them the best people they can be, not always win some kind of imaginary battle. Because really, you get, kids and their parents, sometimes they're the only people they're around each other. And that can get really bad when you're always just trying to be right constantly and you're beating your kid down, mentally. That can be very, very tough to get out of. So you guys are doing the opposite. Guarantee your kids are going to turn out great. I'm curious to hear some of that, some of the rap. That's super interesting. I'm glad you guys allowed that.
No,
are they still doing that, or was that a one weekend
hit? Now, but it was fun while it lasted.
I figured. Understood. I'm sure that's great, and the fact that they even did it. If you guys were humbug, I'm always right. People might have never even seen that or known they did it. Nope. They might have told you in 10 years and you would have laughed about it. But, so anyway, Jacqueline, this has been fantastic. I don't want to take any more of your time. We literally just hit the 45-minute mark. So this has been fantastic. Again, you didn't have to be here. This went absolutely incredible, and a bunch of great nuggets. And look, I want a couple quick things. For anybody who is interested in this, I implore you, go listen to the podcast on the Millionaire Secrets show. It's Jeff Lerner's podcast series. Jaqueline was one of the last few episodes at the time of this airing. And if you're a parent, if you're a kid that wants to have a little bit of a better understanding on why your parents are the way they are, and maybe you can have an influence on them as well, because it's not always, parents to kids. It can be the other way around. This could really, really help you. Or if you're thinking about having kids and you want to get prepared now, I would go check out the episode. It's really, really impactful. And hopefully this is kind of a piggyback with that, can help parents across the world eventually. And I meant what I said about this being turned into some kind of like ebook to simply just to help people, I really think it would make a ginormous impact.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
So thank you for your time. This has been fantastic. And yeah, it was a blast. And thank you to the audience. And we'll talk soon, Jack. And thank you so much.